Welcome back, my friends, to the final chapter of Dome of the Rath. Chapter 7, the final battle. White, the third cosmic being, the man Rathbone and Brown had been battling for many billions of years, stood right in front of them with a grin on his face. He wasn't a tall man. He had a weathered face, a balding head, and wore a neat button-down chevrolet shirt. But the most notable thing about White's appearance was his enormous moustache. He had grown that thing during his time at the school. He had played the part of a genuine teacher, but had later revealed himself to be the evil spirit of the stars. That moustache was infused with massive amounts of power. It was almost like it was alive, waiting for the moment to pounce, like a tiger in the savannah stalking its prey. "Brown, Rathbone, we meet again," White said, with a grin on his round face. The darkness surrounding White and Taylor suddenly vanished as huge lights lit up the room. It wasn't detention block. No, it was an empty floor with no furnishings whatsoever. As the Order's eyes adjusted, they realized White and Taylor were surrounded by a group of people. Around 50 of the school's old teachers stood looking at them. Johnson, Martindale, Wilson, Pinfold, all of them used to work at the Hairy Boys High School. The shock hit Brown all at once. This was a trap. "Got him!" White laughed, and slowly walked toward the open elevator door. Time seemed to freeze, and White's expression was that of victory. "It seems you've fallen. Right into my trap, fellas," White said jovially. "All these teachers are under my control. I've cast a spell to control their minds." He gestured to Taylor. "This one is particularly loyal, but there have been others." White's expression changed to a more serious tone. "You see, Brown, throughout history, I've been controlling countless gullible humans. All were used to help me find a way off this horrible planet. One particular host was a man named Adolf Hitler." Smithy gasped. He had been worshipping Jesus H. Hitler for years. He was wearing Hitler-themed underwear as they spoke. White continued. "He was a particularly loyal one that helped gather human souls to power my machines. I controlled John F. Kennedy to bring me back samples of moon rock for my research after sending astronauts to space." "Penis lol," Rathbone said before White could continue, and charged forward, his dome pointed straight at White. As he powered up his dome laser, he dodged past some books thrown by Miss Ellis, did a somersault over Martin Whale, and landed doing the splits. The teachers converged like zombies, all under White's control. Mr. Russell swung a weak punch that was merely a breeze for Rathbone, and Hardy flung a beaker at an abnormally high speed. After dodging Hardy's beaker, he picked up the pace and locked domes with Pinfold. It was like two bison fighting for the female courtship. Two of the brightest domes at NBHS collided, and a shockwave of power emanated throughout the room, blowing down nearby teachers and flinging dust into the air. Both teachers were pushing as hard as they could, but in the end, Rathbone's unequaled power won out, and he pushed Pinfold to the side. Meanwhile, Smithy, Brown, and Stapley snuck around the back of the kerfuffle and ran into Bertie, who was being held by the teachers before the fight. He was looking bruised and weary and had lipstick marks all over his neck. Brown shook two teachers unconscious as the group moved to a safe area. Rathbone made it to White, who had a hard look on his face. Rathbone fired his dome laser directly at White when he was less than 3 meters away. but White blocked the attack with his mustache. The mustache hair had extended into a massive tendril that had deflected the bolt in less than a second. Seizing the opportunity to attack the Dark Lord, Rathbone charged forward and spear-tackled White right through the floor to ceiling windows, and the two disappeared over the edge of the building. The teachers all huddled around the smashed window and peered over the edge. An intense feeling of suspense tinged the air as Smithy's heart jumped into his throat. After what seemed like a million years, Rathbone's glistening dome slowly rose up from the edge as his stoic face rose from the depths. He was floating on a wave of codes. White was nowhere to be seen, and a wave of relief washed over Smithy. Taylor had a shocked look on her face, and the teachers looked confused. And then White was back. He rose slowly behind Rathbone, held up by his moustache. Giant tentacles of hair from his lips stretched all the way into the abyss below, holding White up. "You can't get rid of me that easily, Rathbone." Rathbone, confused, turned around. "What is this? Some weird hentai crap?" Rathbone flew after him, codes streaming from his fingertips, and suddenly Brown was running towards the smashed window. He whipped his cape up to blind the teachers as they ran. Diving out the window head first, he landed in the palm of his giant hand and flew after them. Suddenly, all hell broke loose. The teachers realized that the order was split, and turned to Smithy, Bertie, and Stapley. Taylor had an evil smile on her face as she closed in on the three, eggplant in hand. "Hey now, Taylor, it's me, Smithy." Smithy desperately tried to sway the witch, but Taylor kept walking, and Bertie grabbed onto Smithy's arm tightly. "I'm gonna spank your little butt, Bruce!" Insanity flared in her eyes. Before she could attack them, however, she was hit by a toaster that sped into the side of her head, knocking her unconscious. The three looked to see where it had come from, and there he was, the most beautiful creature to ever grace the earth with its presence. He was wearing an NBHS school uniform and cool black shades. Bertie's heart skipped a beat as his hero he had been watching on TV since childhood stood before him. Corbangwa the Great stepped toward the three in long, swift strides. The very air around him oozed with the feeling you were in the presence of a god. He turned around and outstretched his palms, firing hot toast from his fingertips into the crowd of angry teachers who recoiled in pain. He held out what looked like an orange to Bertie, who was starstruck but took it in his hand. "This is a Corbangwa fruit." Corbingu's voice was smooth as silk. "It heals your wounds instantly." Bertie looked at him with a smile on his face. "I know, Mr. Corbangwa. You used one in episode 368, part 2, when you fought against the evil mousetrap villain." Corbangwa looked a little creeped out, and turned around to continue fending off teachers. High above the streets of the city, Rathbone hovered in place and waited for White to make the first move. White's mustache twitched, and a long hairy tendril flew at Boner. He dodged and retaliated with a blast of his dome. White fired a few more shots, and Boner narrowly dodged them, returning the fire with some codes. Suddenly, Brown was behind White, floating on his giant hand. Brown tapped White on the shoulder, who turned around, coming face to face with the world's biggest punch. White was sent flying into the side of a skyscraper, and Rathbone fired codes in his direction, but White simply got back up and fired mustache tentacles right back at Brown, like long hairy spears. Out of the smoke they travelled, faster than a speeding bullet, right towards Brown. Rathbone looked across. Brown didn't have time to react. He wasn't going to make it. Rathbone did the only thing he could do. He flung himself in front of Brown, standing on his own hand. One swift movement that meant Brown would live. That was all that mattered to Rathbone. Brown would live. The impact blasted Brown backwards as Rathbone's body took the blow. Brown held Boner on his lap. The spears had cut most of his stomach open, and he was fading fast. "Brown," Rathbone said weakly. "Brown, it was never about getting back to normal." Rathbone's voice was raspy as the blood filled his lungs. Brown was crying, his face wet with tears. "It was about finding happiness, regardless of what form we are in." Brown spoke in a high-pitched voice between sobs. "Wayne, on my travels I found a way to vanquish the evil in white forever." Rathbone's weary eyes perked up. Brown continued, "Lend me the last of your power, and I can deliver the killing blow, old friend." Rathbone thought for a while, and then the dome began to glow. A shimmering white light filled the top, and Brown reached his hand into the light, grabbed Salvation and pulled. Brown pulled out a massive sword of shimmering white dome energy about the size of a car, and gave it to the giant hand, which held it in its massive fingers above them. "Mr. Brown," Rathbone's eyes glimmered, "I don't feel so good." Rathbone disintegrated, and faded into nothingness in Brown's shaking arms. Tears streaking down Brown's face, he turned back to White, who was standing in place with a grin on his face. "You're gonna get it now, boy," Brown said through gritted teeth, as he switched the giant hand to manual mode and grabbed the shimmering lightning bolt. "There's no way to kill me," White taunted. Rage filled Brown to the brim, and he charged forward, flinging the lightning bolt right at White at 1,000,000 miles an hour. White prepared to dodge again, but was suddenly struck in the back of the head by a burning hot slice of toast. The toast fell into the abyss, and White looked up in time to see the shimmering bolt of light bury itself in his chest. "Impossible!" was all White managed to say, before he was blasted downward by the impact. Brown watched White, the evilest being in the known universe, fall to his doom, pinned underneath Rathbone's dying breath. He disappeared into the thick clouds below, and a loud crash followed as he landed on the street. "You're welcome," a voice echoed to Brown's left, and a student in NBHS uniform floated toward Brown slowly. "What? How are you flying, young lad?" Brown had not known anyone to fly besides the cosmic beings, and this student was flying completely unassisted. "I distracted that hairy man. Is he dead?" Corbingu asked. "I was just about to check," Brown said, and flew his giant hand beneath the clouds and towards the city streets, while Corbangyard followed. A crater the size of an elephant lay on the street below. Cars piled up on either side, and a massive crowd of people gathered around the edge. In the center lay White. His lifeless body had a bowling ball-sized hole through it, and it was clear the war was over. As they neared his body, White's mustache began to fade away, as if it had been deleted from existence by Thanos. Eventually, it was completely gone, and White looked clean-shaven. Meanwhile, Smithy was about to swing the frying pan Kobangwa had given to him at Mr. Bolton, when Bolton stopped in his tracks. His eyes widened, he blinked and looked around. Every teacher stopped, as if they had woken from a spell. "White's spell has been broken!" Bertie shouted in joy, as he went around hugging different confused-looking teachers. "They did it, Bruce!" A smile slowly crept across Smithy's face, as the realization struck him. "Well, kiss my sister and call me Stevie!" Smithy joined the celebration and rejoiced. Stapley had been munching toast in the corner, and got up to join them. It was over. An hour or so after the final blow, what was left of the Order gathered on the street in front of the FBI building around White's body. A depressing air hung over them, as they thought about Rathbone's sacrifice. "Alexa, this is so sad," Smithy said. "Play Hitler's Sieg Heil speech." The Fortnite default music began to play, and everyone started the Fortnite default dance. Thousands on the street, in or around the crater, danced in perfect synchronization to the hella epic Fortnite music that echoed through the city streets. Men driving their cars crashed dancing. Women holding their newborn babies dropped them and began to dance. The babies, of course, also got up and joined the flash mob. They continued for 1,000,000 days and 1,000,000 nights. When they needed to relieve themselves, they did so whilst dancing. When someone got tired and died from exhaustion, a new person filled their place. And that was how it was, every day and every night. On everyone in the Order's mind, however, was Rathbone's glistening dome and his sacrifice to save the universe. The end. Thank you all for coming with me on this beautiful, heart-wrenching journey.